Do you want to intro us or do you want me to intro us?
I can intro. What is it, episode 7?
I think we're on 8 now.
Are you sure?
No.
No. We're never sure.
Probably 8. But episode 7 didn't have any microphones, so
It's not that high of a number to count to.
No. But I don't know if we I think we subconsciously omitted the last one because of the microphone quality.
Who cares?
It was pretty bad. It inspired these. It's just a little bit high up on my neck though.
It's literally on your throat.
Should be. You can get my bass, the vibrations in my throat. I think it is 8.
Are you sure?
70%.
I'll look at all our subscribers' comments to find out. It's 7.
No fucking way.
Yeah.
We're on episode 7?
We're on episode 7, yeah. Episode 6 was rural physiotherapist.
Okay, I was optimistic. And this one is rural strength and conditioning coach. Cool. We're simple with our titles.
Yeah.
Basically.
You don't get a name. You're just SMC coach
Rural
now.
S&C coach.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. So this is Recording Rural. We're on episode 7. We are on episode 7. I'm Nathan.
That's Jamie.
We're introducing. I'm Jamie.
I'm still Riley, yeah.
Still Riley. Every once in a while we mix it up.
Yeah.
I get to be Riley some days. Cool. So the purpose of our Recording Rural podcast is to discuss health parameters and advantageous opportunities that are presented by living in rural northern climates and communities. And so here you are. You're from a northern rural community. You left for a bit. And now
Yeah,
you're
for
back.
a minute, yeah.
For a bit more than a bit.
Yeah, a bit more than a bit.
And now you're back, but you're back with roots.
Yeah, I was born and raised in the Smithers Hospital. Lived in Houston until I was 7, going on 8 years old. Yeah, I entered into Walnut Park in grade 3 from Twain Sullivan in Houston, so I was kind of just always in the valley. And then I carried through all the way to graduating from SSS, and then I moved away for 16 years, which, I mean, in the grand scheme of the length of my life, is a pretty substantially long time.
For sure.
Came back in the fall of 2018, but we didn't really settle here till the spring because I went out on tour for work through that whole winter. And then we bought our house here in the spring of 2019. And I was traveling in and out of kind of town, so I was it almost felt like I was here part-time for the subsequent 3 years after that, finishing my contract with Bobsled Canada, and then fully situated myself here by opening Titan Performance. I'm guessing that's going to come up a bit because of the topic of strength conditioning and rural.
Titan Performance.
Titan Performance, my gym, just around the corner from here. And so yeah, it's kind of wild actually. We've been back in since the fall of 2018, and it feels like it's gone by pretty quick. I mean, about half of that, the whole world was on shutdown, so we were just kind of locked in Smithers. Locked in Smithers, and then I was traveling in and out during that time, which was a whole other wrinkle of experiences that I wouldn't say I enjoyed it, but I definitely won't ever forget it.
For sure. You're a very well-traveled person. If you could, off the top of your head, guess approximately how many countries you've had to work in.
Well, I actually tried to think about this and go back in my head, and new places pop up from Facebook memories, or you get a Google timeline from your phone. But I've changed so many phones over the years. But I do know I've been on every continent, which was kind of a cool accomplishment that I wasn't necessarily trying to achieve.
Sure.
It just happened. And then almost after the fact, I recognized that was, I probably was in a very unique opportunity to do that because not many people can say that. So I felt really fortunate about that. But in terms of country number,
Above 20,
yeah, it's above 20, easily,
above 30.
probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. What was it that, with all your exposure to different countries, different cultures, different food, different everything, why return to Smithers?
Yeah, I guess that's the key question. The Smithers was always home for me. Even when I went away and subsequently had my athletic career, when I was playing football, all the way from the CGFL into college, and as I went through the ranks, you'd always have the program, and it would list where people were from. And mine always listed Smithers, even though I was living in different places. This is where I always associated home with. It was a bit interesting because there's no football in Smithers, so there was no one else ever on any of the pamphlets
Sure.
from even remotely close to that. And so I took a great source of pride in that for some reason that I wasn't really a conscious thing, but I did. I think I enjoyed the challenge of coming from somewhere where you maybe weren't anticipated to come from and go and try and achieve some things in a sport. But in that time, I always reflected on Smithers as being home, although I didn't actually ever really contemplate opportunities to come back, especially when I was an athlete. I didn't really see them. I didn't come back in the summers. I came back one time for a short period of time when I took a semester off school, but other than that, I stayed in the city centers to train and have exposure to those opportunities. In doing so, it made me recognize that maybe there was an opportunity for me to come provide that level of support to the community. And then the other side of that is that, I'd met my now wife, Catherine, who, we were quite planned out and started to decide that we wanted to have a family. Mm-hmm. And, she was the light of my life, and we started talking about what we wanted in the future, and we started talking about kids, and then I decided, or didn't decide, but I started to think and be like, oh man, like Smithers would be a good place. Your kids can still walk to school. Just the thought of raising a family in the hustle and bustle of the city, mm-hmm. and then the cost of living and all this stuff. And so we started to discuss that quite a bit. And I'm ever thankful to my wife for it because she's from far away in Ontario, from the big city and stuff like that. So it was a massive adjustment for her. But I think also now recognizing that what we have in the north as a young family is quite unique. We have access to the ski hill, and we can get out camping, and we go out fishing, and your access to outdoor activities is high. You're not dealing with a bunch of traffic congestion. You're quite tied to the community, probably a little bit more. And I think those are the things that kind of drew me back, even though they were always subconsciously there. Those are the reasons why I considered Smithers to be home. All of a sudden, when having kids was on the horizon, those things went up mm-hmm. on the hierarchy of importance for me, just largely because I always cherished the skills that I got growing up in this environment, like being out in the woods and how to start a fire and mm-hmm. camping and avalanche safety and backcountry skiing and, just rolling down to the outdoor rink and playing hockey, and which, you can do in a lot of places in Canada, but it offered a lot of exposure to stuff like that. And then also the opportunity for us to, if we're like, hey, we want to go camping and get off the grid, you can do that like in a couple minutes. Like you're gone. And I lived in cities for a long time, and I'd start getting a little bit jungle fever, and I'd want to
for sure
boost out, and you realize you're like, oh, this is a production. Like this is a real production. You're trying to beat traffic out of the city, everything like that. But all in all, coming back, one of the major contributing factors was to try to support, I think the entire community's kind of health and fitness and performance aspirations, But where it really spawned in my mind was that I wasn't able to ever come home because of the training opportunities that I was being awarded elsewhere, and those came with sacrifices. I had to stay and pay rent, and I had to get a side job and do all that stuff, and I probably could have lived more comfortably at home. But then I didn't think I knew I would be missing out on the quality of training that I would have been exposed to. And I wasn't wrong. Like, I ended up getting to train with Derek Hansen, who ended up becoming my mentor. And looking back in hindsight, not have taken that opportunity to stay through the summers and train with him, I probably wouldn't even have went down this path as a coach. He was the one that largely kind of steered me in that direction. So, and he's, for those people in the strength and conditioning world that follow any speed or power development, they probably know who he is. So he was a major influential part in that too, and I kind of recognized that at about that point in time that this is maybe something I wanted to do as a career, so I was also staying around for work experience opportunities. And to be honest, still at that time though, I never in my wildest dreams did I think that I would come up and own a gym in Smithers, but here we are.
Right on. Yeah.
What's the from all the experience of being away, what are the biggest things that you bring back, like you said, with the gym, for both creating those opportunities for the younger athletes, but then also what are the things that you can take from all those experiences and the learnings and education that you got in that sport world, but then apply it to like your just general person that wants to get a little bit fitter, or the fitness enthusiast, however you want to kind of label that side of things. What's the biggest stuff that you bring to both of those worlds from those experiences?
Yeah, I thought about this a lot. I didn't work with what, I guess in the industry you'd say general population work. I was mostly in a specialized athlete environment. But one of the biggest things with that, especially when you're traveling with teams on the road all the time, is you're constantly problem solving. Constantly. And it ends up becoming, it's outside the book. You're not in a controlled laboratory testing situation. You have the pressures of competition, the travel, the jet lag, all this stuff. So you're consuming scientifically validated information, which I had a high level of exposure to, because let's say when I started working with Alpine Canada, I was working with the Canadian Sport Institute. So I had access to Dr. Smith, who's like Canada's top physiologist, and Matt Jordan, who is a world-renowned sports scientist researcher, and he was at his master's level at that time. And so
people aren't going to get, you're just dropping these names right now, they don't get that.
Yeah.
Like, who's this guy? He's kind of a big deal.
No, that's fine. And I
No, I know.
I implore listeners to go, we're talking about strength and conditioning. If you're interested in strength and conditioning or sports science or anything like that, I implore you to go check these people out. They have a lot of great online content.
Yeah.
For young coaches that are learning and stuff. But I had firsthand exposure with these people in these very scientific situations. But Dr. Smith was interesting. So, big-time researcher. He oversaw the kin department and the master's program at University of Calgary for a number of years. He's now since retired, but I think he had been a part of or consulted for over 20 Olympics. Like, his exposure is massive. They were sneaking spin bikes into the housing at the Sarajevo games and stuff like that because they weren't allowed to, and going rogue and doing all this stuff so they could do proper recoveries. And he's got wild stories.
It's cool.
So I started to learn everything in the book in the scientific setting, and then I started to hang out with Doc Smith, and we'd be doing some more traditional education stuff, and then I'd go have a chat with him in his office and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about with Alpine. We're in a super diverse environment, you're high elevation, jet lag, and all sorts of stuff. And he was like, oh, yeah. So and then I started having real world problem solving discussions with him. We're working in a integrated support team, so I was working alongside really intelligent physiotherapists, good practitioners, and post-surgical situations from doctors. So I'm learning a bunch from these people, but it's happening in a real world setting. And you're problem solving all the time. So then, when I start working with let's say, general population, or people that are just after general health and fitness goals or just general physique goals, you kind of start, I always go at it from like a problem, so okay, like what's the injury history, this type of stuff. So you start problem solving to the point where it's almost an innate process. And that largely was handed down to me from doing that in like a very acute, high level, okay, like we got to get this person ready to go win a gold medal like on this day.
Yeah.
Right? And they just finished an ACL surgery. What's the plan forward? So, you know, in terms of scale, it gives you some general, you know, you start to ask good questions. On the other side of that too is learning a lot of this. I recognize that whether I'm working with a, you know, someone my age, like I'm going on 40 here, that just wants to, you know, stay in shape, or someone older that has never been in the gym before and they just want to start, or, you know, a young athlete, the understanding of musculoskeletal development and physiological development and everything like that holds true to within a bandwidth of tolerable limits, and you're just trying to apply those same rules in an appropriate level to the person that's in front of you, largely by gathering that information from those questions, right? Like, okay, like we have a major bilateral asymmetry in limbs because of an injury, and you know, maybe we want to spend some time working on developing some more muscle architecture, and then we can couple that with working on some function, and you know, maybe there's some neuromuscular, you know, miscoordination going on there. Whatever it is, I'm like, okay, well, I can attend to that by doing X, Y, and Z with an athlete because of exposure. How do I do the same thing with someone with less exposure? And where I really got, I hate saying that I'm good at anything, but where I got better at this was when I worked with the US Paralympic Alpine team.
For sure.
Because every single athlete there had a different like functional disability. I had everything from visually impaired to you know, people with missing parts of a limb, lower limb, total limbs, multiple limbs. We had a girl, Stephanie Jallin, she was like unilateral, so she left side. I think she had left arm, left leg, and then she didn't on her right side. And some of them were born with these, like a pelvic dysplasia, or you know, spina bifida. I had a couple of those. Cerebral palsy. And you have all this array of these different types of athletes: below the knee amputee, spinal cord injury, right? Andrew Klurka, we won 2 gold medals in Pyeongchang in downhill and Super G, and the guy absolutely launched these from up in Alaska, but like he broke his back twice. And he wrestled through high school with a broken back.
That sounds difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? So, you start learning about problem solving.
Yeah.
Like really, like, okay, how are you, you know, because I'm like, okay, well, how am I going to try to get accomplishable goals for each of these people? Like, so what are the measuring sticks of success? You know, like I had an athlete, she had 13 different muscle reattachment surgeries. So like, we didn't even know where. You couldn't go look at like an anatomy book and like, there's the attachment. Like, and we didn't know. We had to go like investigate. So she had like very much more limited core function on one side versus the other. It wasn't like a straight across type thing. So we're even looking at how, you know, the cueing strategy all the way down to the technical aspect of how she's skiing. How do we get her in the position she needs to be? Can we support that in the weight room? So then when I go start working with you know, we open Titan and we start working with like whole populations. I feel like a culmination of those things, largely leading to problem solving, was what led, were the skills that I gained being in that environment. And then also, you know, you're working in other countries all the time and stuff, so you're dealing with a lot of different cultures, cultural norms and stuff like that. So in relating to people in public settings and stuff, getting a pretty acute understanding of how they like to communicate and where their level of like humor threshold limits and stuff like that. Because as you guys know, when you spend time with people, you start to become quite acutely present in their life. You almost become a trusting mechanism to them.
Oh, yeah.
Right, we've talked about that before.
Yeah, they share a lot of information with you and stuff. So, you know, I was in settings with athletes where you're dealing with a lot of confidential discussion settings and stuff. And right, so I was just like immensely immersed into this situation where then if you scale it out and say, oh, hey, we can provide higher level service to all of the population by continuing to develop these skill sets and handing these on to athletes, and then also subsequently coaches. Like I want to hand this on to coaches in northern BC, so it's sustainable, and families don't be like, oh wow, I got to send my 13-year-old away all year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's one thing to send them away to go play, but like in the off season, if you know you can trust your son or daughter can come back home and live cheaper and get exceptional training and guidance and mentorship, that to me was something that I saw in that whole world too, because a lot of the athletes that I, saw kind of succeeding through that had that mentorship earlier on.
Yeah.
In that situation where they really had people, not just telling them what to do, but teaching them what to do.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I think we had McCreesh on before.
Yeah.
And I was talking how I know for me, like, I'm not to devalue knowing the science or the background, knowing your anatomy, all this stuff, because you have to know that. But when you were saying, like, you're dealing with someone that now is missing one leg or an arm or dealing with stuff, it's like, you need to know this, but sometimes some of the book starts to go out the window a little bit, and like you said, it's just like problem solve. Like, how do we, here's the goal, well, here's what the textbook said, well, that was looking at this perfect human that stood like this in your book.
Like the Vitruvian Man.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
Now it's like, how do we navigate it? What new cues? And that's where, like you said, those experiences of you going out, different cultures, the way you talk to them, the way you develop those relationships. And I think that's awesome that you've taken that, bring it to now either just the general population in town and have those bringing all that experience, or like you said with the athlete, getting on them earlier and building a relationship from then. Because if you build a relationship with a 10, 11, 12-year-old that's passionate about, just call it sports in general, by the time you're 18, if you're still working with said person, you're not even gonna have to like say much. Like, you'll just have that relationship, and you'll look at them and be like, you can give them like a head nod, and they're like, yeah, I should have extended my hips, or in whatever.
You become a signpost.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think I know
how
for
many
me,
kids get to say that they've had like someone pour into their lives for like 6 years, someone who wasn't a relative to them.
Yeah.
It's not that common.
No.
Well, that was
for me.
That was just it, right?
Yeah.
So when I went and played football, you have a very diverse community of players on the football team from all walks of life, and a lot of guys that I played with, they were in the sport because that became a mentorship avenue from them. They came from a challenging home background or lower socioeconomic. This kind of leveled the playing field. As long as they were committed to what they were doing, there's coaches and people that were going to pour into them, and that's why and I just use football as an example, but like, sport is immensely important for kids. I'm very biased to this because it was massively important to me, and not that every kid has to do it, because in the same sense, the arts and cultures and stuff are the same, but for some kids, that is where they find themselves socially and psychologically and everything like that. And a lot of times, if it was in a situation where they maybe wouldn't have got that, the father wasn't in there, right? So all of a sudden they now have like a male role model in their life and stuff that are doing that, and people saying, hey, like, I believe in you, and showing them that like it really counts, like, especially in the younger levels, like, we're really just looking at like work ethic and effort above talent kind of thing.
For sure.
And that becomes a hugely important part of it. And so I'm playing with these guys from like all over the country and stuff like that, and you can really see that, like you said, like how many people had someone pour into their life. Almost all of them at some point in time, like, that's what it gave them. Someone poured into their life. Next they're like getting their education paid for and stuff like that, and it's a profoundly positive kind of scenario. So it's like, from a public aspect, more than anything, like, given all these experiences, like, okay, well, how can we positively, if you have like one parent come to you and say, hey, like, you made a world of difference in my kid's life, that's kind of a journey worth embarking on, type thing. And I think it just always hit home with me because I had a number of those along the way. Basketball coach here, Joe Toner in town. Baseball, Mr. Martinelli, may he rest in peace. Were two big ones earlier in my life, like to the point where I used to go like work on the farm for Joe and stuff like that. And where they were like a pretty big fixture in your life, and quite frankly, probably a big reason why I actually graduated high school. Like I was not a top level student kind of thing like that. I was a bit rowdy and everything, so.
No. That doesn't sound right.
Yeah. So, I was a bit of a wild animal, a bit of a loose cannon and stuff, and so sport and that kind of direction from coaches and stuff was immensely positive in my life. And so I also felt like, with us opening this year, like we, even more so than maybe the physical success in the actual sport, the actual like helping the kids with that, having that support mechanism that kids can come tight and they feel safe there. They're going to get good guidance. They're also going to get hard truths sometimes, right? Like, we run programs. Kids are showing up late, unprepared. They get those hard truths, and that's part of and sometimes that message doesn't always hit home, and maybe it doesn't hit the kid till later, maybe it doesn't ever, kind of thing. But for a lot of kids, it does. And like I got those hard truths, and then I made decisions, and I ended up making the right decisions, and then it helped me moving forward as an adult. And so that kind of became largely a lot of the contributing factors to. Because you do the same thing at the higher level with athletes, so you're trying to keep them, especially with the more success they have, right? You're trying to keep them on the rails. Yeah. And it's not always like you're the best kind of thing. Like sometimes you're telling someone that's like really good at their sport that like they're messing things up, and you got to be able to have those conversations as well.
Yeah, I think what I'm gathering from that, and like I know just from the bit of experience through sports stuff that I have, like it's call it the 5x5 back squat or whatever you're giving someone has the smallest impact on that development of that person or that athlete. It's you, like you said, like fully wanting support, whether it be an athlete or the general population person. That relationship's gonna get them further in their sport or along their health journey more than your A, B, C, D, whatever part of your workout is that day. Like that, at the end of the day, yes, that has to happen, but it means nothing compared to that relationship building.
Yeah, and the commitment to showing up every day, completing it, and doing all that type of stuff. It's it creates a level of kind of self-worth and autonomy, and like, I can do that kind of like little build up little tasks. Because like big goals can be daunting for people, and that was one of the bigger things. I remember when I was a kid here, and I even talked to kids here about it that are aspiring to maybe go on to the next level, and a lot of times they're like, I'm from the north. Yeah. Right? Like no coaches are going to look at me.
They weren't, or you specifically, you didn't see the path to end goal through Smithers where hopefully people can begin to start seeing that now.
Like, and it wasn't even like, it was just kind of like it was already written off as an option. And, I think regardless, I'd really like kids to feel like, if this is something I want to do, I can try. And not necessarily that you're always going to accomplish it, but the pursuit is worth it.
Yeah.
Always. The pursuit, if you really try, the pursuit is always worth it.
Yeah.
And same thing with someone that's on like maybe a fitness or they're starting a fitness journey, like if you really actually try and commit to it, the pursuit is worth it. The only time it's not worth it if there's a half-assed attempt at it.
Yeah.
And then you fail off. But then at the end of the day, like, and I tell clients this too, I'm like, you're the one that has to look at yourself in the mirror. You're not letting me down.
Yeah.
Right? Like, at all. And same thing with athletes. Like, you have to look in the mirror and say, am I really trying to do this?
Yeah.
Or am I just pretending to try to do this? And people do it for different reasons. The athlete side, I see a lot of kids, like, they just want to have the letter on the jacket.
Yeah.
And then there's kids that, like, really want to succeed and stuff like that. And so that's what I mean by sometimes the hard truths and everything is like, you got to challenge. Like, I can't want something for you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But we can create an environment where it's like it's a lot more appealing, and you feel like you accomplish stuff, and like people are high-fiving in there, and like, you know, we see it all the time. Like the level of support at Titan is very high from all the coaches and even all the people that attend it. So
yeah, for sure. I think about like how you said that when you were playing football, like you're the only person who can say that you're from the rural north, and there's almost like this. You almost have to have like this underdog sort of mentality. And I know that I had that when I moved to the city, like not competing in any sport, but there's like this inherent like almost condescension that you can kind of get because you're from the sticks all the time. And it becomes this really funny thing because you get in these environments where people are like really, they're really fixated on like what they know, like knowledge. But I think our experience and like working in rural context or working like how you talked about working on the road, it's not like what you know, it's how qualitative of questions you can ask, and then like your people skills and like your knowledge is really secondary compared to like how inquisitive you can be and how relational you can be, which is very different, I think, from a lot of like pigeonholed specialization approaches that you find in the city.
yeah, you know, it's so I guess that social discourse and everything, and you know, whether it's team environment or individual environment or everything like that is, I guess, for lack of a better term, I would actually like in terms of the hierarchy of outcome, like what you put in an outcome is a mass, like O'Reilly said, is a massive contributor versus like the sets and rep schemes kind of thing. And so you see the you know, you have to know the foundations of the literature and of the basic science and everything like that. But like you can write the most extravagant, beautiful programming, periodize, do everything. If you can't get people to execute it and buy into it, it becomes a lot more meaningless.
That's what Bartholomew is all about.
Totally, I was actually going to say that. And
so don't get lost in your spreadsheet.
So that's who I was going to reference to is Brett. And I've worked with coaches, you know, Quinn Sekulik from the Canadian Sport Institute is one of the best kind of speed power development guys in Canada, for sure. And I worked very closely with him because we were like one of the two guys that really actually ever delved into like speed development and stuff in the CSI in Calgary. So we talked a lot about it. And Quinn kept like handwritten notes, and his systems were very repeatable, and like he had his methodology and stuff, and like he was straight up, like he's like, I don't have interest in like doing Excel spreadsheet and everything like that. He was really good.
I love that.
Yeah. It was like, no, it's excellent. It was such a great thing. It was such a great balance to work alongside that, especially in that environment, because there's this very like hard science driven environment with the CSI where you actually have people doing like hard research there. And then you got Quinn down there, he's got the timing eyes out, and he's just handwriting times and telling jokes with the athletes and everything like that. And we're talking like he was working with the bobsled team back when I was on the national team, and then for a number of years after that. And I was working with Alpine, and we worked alongside each other. And he was very good at teaching the athletes, you know, what they needed to know and feel, and you know, they could run a certain time and kind of know if they're off the mark and stuff like that. There was no spreadsheets. The testing was, he kept relatively rudimentary and everything like that. And like, these are the biggest freaks in the country.
Yeah.
Like the biggest, fastest, strongest units in the country. And it wasn't like, they weren't hooked up to like all the fancy machines all the time and stuff like that. It was just you doing the work, speed development, and handwritten times, and pretty systematic approach, and just like lots of internal education and stuff. And so he's a perfect example of where he knew the science and he expressed it, but he was really it was the art of the environment and everything like that was highly successful for him. And so every athlete that he worked with got very good, all of them. Like it was, and it was because they were executing the things at a high level with a high level of intent, and they were absorbing the knowledge of it rather than this really extravagant thing. And you're just following along. You're like, man, I don't understand why I'm doing this or what I'm doing. And it's overcomplicated, and
Yeah.
you know, I got systems that are in direct conflict with each other going on. You get into like, I've seen athletes get pushed into like pretty significant overreaching scenarios, and
Yeah.
because it's very like by the book, whereas like Quinn would start using just like session, you know, he'd have the timing eyes out, and like someone's time kind of drops off a bit. He's like, no, you're good for the day,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And
I can.
like at like 50% of the volume that was anticipated or whatever, and he'd just make that call.
Yeah. I can just see him being the guy, like, because he's keeping it so simple, like when he's like cueing athletes after, like he'd be like him on his notes, and he'd like it'd be like one word to the 4 athletes, like more jam or work harder, and it means nothing, but to them, because of all the relationship building he did, like in their head, they were like, yeah, when I came out of the blocks, I stood up too quick, and then like all the actual technical stuff they started hearing in their heads because of all of that relationship building and how he got his message across, without it being like a 7-hour PowerPoint on all this speed mechanics, and then after everyone, he's typing in more notes on his computer. It's just like simple, and the athlete gets it, and they can actually take it and run.
I think when I've been programming lately, you guys don't watch The Office, do you? Oh, there's like the Michael Scott KISS philosophy, keep it simple, stupid. Dude, I tell myself that when I program, like all the time. Like I get into the weeds of like exercise selection or like percentile intensity, and I just go, no, keep it simple, stupid. Just keep it simple. It helps. It's like this is like a detail that might exceed where this person is at in their training.
Yeah.
Like it might be completely irrelevant to where they're at currently.
Yeah, and I learned a lot of that watching Quinn, and I got super fortunate to see a lot of different coaches in action, and and a lot of the successes that I saw were from people that either kept things simple or could simplify very abstract constructs to people, and so you start to follow that, and the next thing you know, you're in a situation where you go to work with general population, which I'm always curious if people like that term, being just in terms of.
I worked with a doctor, and he thought every time I said general population, he thought prison system, and I was like, maybe like people don't like that term. I don't know. General population. I'm not in prison, Nathan.
It's just when it's funny because when you're in the high performance side, you either call it that or the public, but like high performance athletes are part of the public. So I get I don't worry about the term too much. So when I say gen pop, I don't mean it to be disparaging, but people that aren't training specifically for like a high level outcome in the sport.
Yeah, I'm only gonna think prison now.
This
is terrible.
Yeah, just picturing people
start going military
red jumpsuits.
Civilians. And so. I never thought about the prison system. That's actually all.
You will be top dog if you keep working with me, though.
You will be the biggest gen pop. Yeah, for sure.
So when you take a step back and you go to start dealing with a public gym setting where you're dealing with all the different populations, kind of utilizing that same methodology where you're not just training someone, you're teaching them and coaching them along the way, but you, like you said, you can't like just egregiously out-science them into being like, what is this guy talking about? But I think also at the same time too, you don't want to oversimplify and just assume no one's ever going to understand something. Like you actually want to try to guide them through, and so going through years of doing that, from like I'd have like straight out of high school development level athletes all the way up to the the highest level, where they're, like at that point you're just kind of a signpost, was a really good skill development, because when I started working with, and then all the way down to even youth athlete, actually that's maybe where I extrapolated it even stronger, is that I could start to see when athletes were coming up to the start of the national team level, provincial level, where the deficits were in those groups, and then working back and saying, okay, well, like if I'm going to coach younger kids as they come up, if I was to send them to a university program or a provincial program or even a national team development program, what are the things that I've seen that is going to help them set them ahead type thing from that perspective, and then so you kind of extrapolate that out to the population, and it's like the biggest one that I come up with is like getting them to understand why they're doing something, the kind of the why and the what and the how, and giving them that knowledge of it, because then they own it, and it's hard for them to deviate from it, because now, like, you can always go back to, like, can you look at yourself in the mirror and say, like, hey, I did everything. It's a lot easier if you just give someone a program and say, hey, do this. They don't really understand it, they don't own it. If they don't do something properly, they can be like, well, I mean, I didn't know.
Yeah.
But if you make sure that they know, they can never have that internal monologue of like where they bail themselves out, because they know why they're doing it. Because it's just a lot easier to bail yourself out when you're like, well, this is stupid. Like, this doesn't make sense. Why would I do this? So that's kind of the philosophy that came out of from a lot of those people, and mostly because like they, you know, say for Matt Jordan, for instance, he's, you know, starting to talk about like R coding at a very high, you know, level, and he's creating a course material about this, which he gave me some of his course material. So I went through and like he made it very digestible from an entry level situation, even though what he's working up to is very challenging. You're learning a whole new language. And he's primarily targeting, you know, performance coach, strength conditioning coach type populace there, who, I mean, some maybe did more statistics than others and stuff, but you were not evaluating data sets this large and writing an entire code around doing, you know, running data sets through this program. But if you can learn how to do it, it's highly valuable if you go work with, say, an NBA team and they're doing a whole bunch of statistical evaluations, or you're doing a lot of different performance analytics. You can run those models really quick. So it's like a very challenge, you know, where like the people that were doing that were just like statisticians. They weren't, you know, that's what they were, computer engineers and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden you got a bunch of strength coaches going to a conference learning how to do this stuff. So you come out and if you just start like with a level of knowledge up here, we're all gonna be like,
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
a lot of our wheelhouse.
Yeah, for sure. Being able to like articulate. It's kind of like the whole philosophy of like, if you can't communicate something to a 6-year-old, you don't know it well enough.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, that sort of idea. I don't know how. I think that there are like maybe some pitfalls in that idea.
Yeah.
But by and large, it is true.
You got to match the education you're giving said person to where they're at in your journey. Because eventually you don't have to get to the highest thing of education for someone, but you have to give them education because eventually you want them to be autonomous. Some people might choose to always want that support because it's good for them, and an athlete might just always have the support because it's given to them because of the context of being like a high performance athlete. But ideally the goal is this person can be autonomous in whatever setting they eventually get to.
Yeah, for sure. I do think that that's kind of like. So we're getting our timer check. I think it's also like part of like building in that why, but not just the why, but also like that inquisition, or not inquisition. That's like Spanish Inquisition. That inquiry like mentality where you're knowing the nuances of your own body. Like you're not just executing your own program. Like if I have a youth and we're like doing like depth jumps, something with like a high intensity element to it, I'm trying to explain why we're doing this so that I don't have some kid and they're like, oh yeah, after we did depth jumps, like I hobbled around for days. I'm like, why? It's like, well, my knees were sore before I did depth jumps. Like, why didn't you tell me that? Like, don't just like blindly follow my program. Like, know why we're doing this so that we can like make some adjustments. And yeah, I think you can run into some like recovery issues as well if you just like go, here's my master plan, follow it blindly because you are a human and there are no nuances to your anatomy.
Well, it's ironic. So this is something that got me in trouble a lot in school, was always asking why. Like a lot of trouble. Apparently it was quite disruptive. But for me, I couldn't ever comprehend something without really truly understanding why. I had a really hard time with like, just remember it and then regurgitate it on a test and then go. Like, my brain is just like, no chance. It's not happening. I have to know why. So I think my favorite thing from an athlete or a client or anybody, no matter what, is to always ask me why, because it keeps me like refining my questions in the program about why we're doing stuff. And it shows me that they're also engaged in understanding how it's going to help them. if those two things happen, I feel like you're always going to have a successful program. Even if it's like very rudimentary, like we're focused on a couple things, or it's something quite robust. You know, you're on a yearly training plan, you have all these different training modalities going on, and you're balancing all that. If you're getting those questions, if you're having that two-way dialogue with them, I think you're always going to see the best progress moving forward. Like you said, okay, base level anatomy, physiology, those sciences exist. When you go to give that justification for something, you want to make sure that it's sound in those justifications. And then also that problem solving about why that's applicable to them and achieving their goals. And sometimes it's because you're trying to accomplish this thing, which will help you accomplish this thing, which then in turn actually gets you here. Mm-hmm. And they need to know that, right? And I ran into, a perfect example, I ran into that working with the National Alpine Ski Team. We started doing running mechanics with them. These guys are like, we're alpine skiers. Like, why would we do that?
Mm-hmm. Is my ankle supposed to move?
Yeah, right.
I let the slope get.
So, and I know we're short on time, but I'll tell you the justification that I gave to them. So when I went into the National Alpine Team, about 90% of them all had at least one ACL reconstruction. The rate of ACL injury was massive. My goal was, obviously to help them perform, but I looked at it and said, the largest key performance indicator and success in this sport is lost days of training due to injury, by large part. Like a full ACL surgery, because then by the time they rehab, they're often pushed to rush back because their points are only protected for so long. And so people can find themselves on the, they just make the national team, they can find themselves outside the point list and then just all of a sudden gone with one injury. So the stakes are quite high. So I was like, okay, well, if we can have an effect on that, like a gross effect on, you're never going to stop ACL injuries altogether in there, but what we consider the non-contact ACL injuries, like back-seated, just in a bad position in a knee pop. So you go flying into the fence going 150 kilometers an hour and your ski doesn't come off, like things can happen.
Yeah, sure.
There's even a resilience to that. But I say, okay, so what are the key contributors to this? And there was already some statistical evaluation coming out from Matt Jordan that indicated that majority of the crashes happen in the bottom third of the course. So then I was like, okay, well, energy systems need to ensure that people can tolerate that level of fatigue all the way up to like the longest downhill run, which is Wengen. It's like 2.5 minutes long. They actually just raised it. The other side of that was they ski on extremely hard surfaces. They actually inject water into the snow. And then when we go train in the summer, we're also on glacial surfaces. So it's super hard. And there's a ton of vibration, massive perturbations, tons and tons of force going through the body. There's like, on a GS turn, there's like 4.5 to 5 G forces at the apex of every single turn. And they're just bending that ski and releasing it. And you have all these kind of knee valgus going with like internal rotation in a backseated position. So you're just like asking for knee injuries. So then I was like, okay, well, there's got to be some glute, hip, knee function qualities and everything so I framed everything that we were doing initially around, okay, how are we going to protect the knees? And one of the things is refining running mechanics so that they could actually run appropriately for some of their conditioning and get them off of the road bikes and spin bikes wholly, because there was no impact. Mm-hmm. They were actually detraining the structural tolerance to impact through the summers by just biking all the time, and then they go get on a glacier, and that acute chronic index of that force application was just off the charts, and guys' bodies would start breaking apart. Right. And then by the time they got into the season, they'd already gone over the like achievable limit, as it were, and then you could start to see like overreaching fatigue set in and kind of chronic injuries, and then a higher incidence of acute injuries. And if you have an acute injury later in the season, your points are protected for an even shorter period of time. And that's also when World Championships and Olympics are. So I said, we're going to learn proper running mechanics so I can use those rudimented drills to start to develop structural tolerance, but you're also going to become more neuromuscularly and coordinated, refined, so that you can actually go for runs, and we can actually start to use some running and higher level plyometrics to help support your training needs. They all bought into it. We all executed it all, went through, with a whole cohort of other things that was driving that. And then in that next subsequent 6.5 years, we only had one new ACL injury. Now that's quite it's just a correlated response. There's a whole bunch of other things into that. But when we were testing a bunch of stuff, a lot of the qualities, like the next generation of athletes, on average, their CP2, their critical power over 2 minutes, on average was higher than what the previous team record used to be.
That's cool.
And so then the expectation for how they train. So now even the athletes that are currently at the top level, Jack Crawford and those guys, I started them in development. They train like this now. And so then the other side of that is, and I'll leave it at this, is when you inevitably do get injured and you have to go start doing rehab, if you had a higher level of like neuromuscular coordination and you're better at these like marching drills and everything like that, your rehab is going to go a lot better, because those are some of the foundational movements that you need to start to improve. Like you go see someone like Jared, and they're like, okay, now like lift up your knee and like get into an A-march position. If you were bad at that to begin with, what are the odds you're going to be able to use that as a tool for rehab after the fact?
Yeah.
Very low. So you're like almost preemptively preparing athletes to be able to rehabilitate at a higher level in the event of the likelihood of an injury.
Yeah.
That's cool. Do I have time, Jared, for one more question? Like off of that, what are like characteristics that you think someone, or even like skills or characteristics that someone needs to be like a better problem solver? Like you think about how someone wasn't just like throwing, when it comes to like decreasing those ACL injuries, it's not just like, oh, well, we know that knees work this way. It's like, oh, we have a problem, let's find the problem so we can find the solution. If you're like to encourage people, not just necessarily in strength conditioning or in a rehabilitative field, just like to embody a problem solving mentality, what do you think are characteristics for that?
Well, my biggest thing is I try to challenge people to actually ask themselves the questions, right? I just had a conversation with an athlete the other day that I'm helping with a project, looking at like how to get recruited into, university level sports. So my first question was, what do you think, outside of your actual scoring metrics on the floor, are the intangibles that a coach is looking for? Because then they say, you have to go, oh, okay. So it's like, it's actually trying to inspire problem solving by allowing people giving them the environment, or even the opening the door for them to ask themselves hard questions. Why am I doing this? All the way to like, what is driving me to do this? Why do I get up and go train in the morning? Am I just doing it to appease people? Am I doing it because I want to achieve greatness? Why am I going to the gym? Right? Like, what are those intrinsic motivators? And so to inspire problem solving in a very organic fashion is to ask them problem solving questions, but don't just give them the answers. Ask them what they think. Get them to go through the actual, say, you don't even have to answer right now. Go through the exercise. I do mental performance stuff with athletes all the time. I have some athletes here. I always ask them, I'm like, what do you think the characteristics are, what characteristics do you think are necessary to be a champion? Or like, what are your championship characteristics? If you go look at model athletes out there, like, what is it about them that you think makes them successful, right? Or a successful program or whatever. Because then they start to say, okay, and then their own philosophical biases and things that are meaningful to them kind of elevate to the top. And then once they have those answers, and I've even challenged them, I'm like, write them on a mirror. But like every time they go look in the mirror, every time they make a decision to do about something, they now know that they've made that decision. So if you do that with problem solving, and stuff, we deal with all the time. Like, oh, like you said, athlete, like, oh, my knee's already hurt. Came and did stuff. It's like, okay, well, what are you doing about your knees? Well, I don't know, right? So then, opening up the questions is like, well, what are the knees, like, are the knees keeping you from doing things that you want to do? Or like, well, how important is your knee health to you? Yeah. Then they go answer, well, it's very important. Well, now the hierarchy of their daily care for their knees automatically goes up because they've verbalized that. So part of the thing to inspire problem solving is to actually just open the door for people to ask questions and not just look at you for answers.
Yeah. Like the difference between being an active learner versus being a passive learner.
Yeah. And like, it's not innate for, like, people need to feel safe to ask you questions and stuff like that. But I'm like, no one's going to get mad at you for asking yourself a question.
Yeah.
Right? There's no dumb question you ask yourself. Oh, what am I trying to figure out here? What is it that I'm trying to do? Stuff like that. And that's the same thing you implore athletes and clients to come and say, like, hey, if you ever are curious why we're doing something, then ask. Totally, I want you to ask.
Yeah.
I actually thrive on you asking me the question.
Yeah, it's cool. I like that. Do you have any excellent thoughts?
No, just I think that's really good. I mean, always have you don't have to have the answer right now, but start to figure out the answer on your internal why, whether it be the big overarching one or continue to ask why, because you'll get to answers quicker.
Yeah, and it keeps a higher level of motivation behind what you're doing. You can get caught in the mundane. Like even, we get up every day, go to work, do that type of stuff. Every once in a while, take a step back and be like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
What am I doing? Am I doing this the most efficient way possible? Can I be better at this?
Yeah.
Is this something I have to be doing right now? Just all those things.
How much time and emotional effort are you wasting because you're not reevaluating your system?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give yourself the freedom to do that. And like I said, you're trying to teach people to do that because then it opens up their ability to problem solve. That's largely how you start to become a signpost because they're already answering the questions before they get to you.
Yeah.
Right? They come in and be like, hey, this is going on. What do you think? They'll give you the right answer.
Yeah.
Like all the athletes I had for like a number of years, developmental years, they basically have a master's in like sport performance development. All of them. I can call up any one of the athletes I've worked with extensively through time period. Their level of knowledge about what we were doing and why and how and stuff like that is so high.
Yeah. It's cool. That's like serious personal investment in the process.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in some cases they didn't really have a choice. Like that was they're like, oh, if you want to be on the national team, you have to move to Calgary and you're going to train with Jamie and stuff. So, but it was a great opportunity for me to really employ those philosophies and hammer them home year over year kind of thing. And then you have these athletes that are just like, they can walk into another strength and conditioning environment and like, no coaches or no one's, there's not going to be any charlatan that kind of pulls the wool over their eyes. Like, oh, I got the magic pill exercise. They're going to be like, why? Right? And if they don't come up with a good answer, those athletes are going to write that person right away because my philosophy was if I can't answer to you in an articulate fashion that is suitable, that you're like, okay, that makes sense, we don't have to do it.
Yeah.
It's cut from the program immediately. So I always had to be ready to justify what I was doing.
Yeah.
Even if it was wild.
It's cool.
Yeah.
I like that. Awesome.
Cool. Thanks for your time, guys.
Yeah. We do our...
Thanks, boss. I don't have. I have to. It was cold out this morning. I had to
You
chug
get
my
to-
coffee.
all right, well-
we gotta finish with the just fist bump. Call her good.
Yeah, we did this one. This is Recording Rural. For our exit, are there any projects on the down pipeline for Time Performance that you want the public, our seven listeners,
our lots of viewers?
No, it's great. I mean, we always have initiatives going on. We currently have our youth athlete development programs going. We do have a couple spots available, although possibly limited right now. So I was looking at the registration numbers are quite full. All of our adult fitness classes are running. We have Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 6 a.m. to 7 a.m., Tuesday, Thursday at noon for 45 minutes, and then another power hour Tuesday, Thursday evenings at 5:30. We have 24-hour access, public gym memberships, personal training, nutrition consultations, programming. Basically all of your health and wellness needs, just getting started, need some more guidance, everything like that. We have the ability to program for people virtually, so you don't actually have to come to us. And we also will be rolling out, by we, mostly Nathan, will be rolling out some future public consumption programs, predominantly focused around physique. Jenna's doing her ladies Olympic lifting course sessions over 6 weeks, and Nathan's putting together a curriculum on a barbell focused primary lift oriented we were talking 6 week?
6 weeks.
6 week session, potentially 2 times a week for those of you that want to become more proficient in your primary movers, deadlifts, squats, all those big lifts so you can do them well and get stronger and impress all your friends. As we move along, there's always projects to be had. Some I can't disclose right now, but lots of exciting things in the future. So appreciate your guys' time.
Right on. Thank you. That's it.
And cut.